Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 38 of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Oh dear. Seems like Hawkeye might be in deep water again. Okay, well, it was just her dog, I guess, but, this really goes to show that Pride has her shaken, and it really does seem like it normally takes a fair bit to get her all shook up like she currently is. It's kind of sad to see, considering how she normally keeps her cool in any and all situations. With maybe one notable exception. So it seems like Mustang is speaking in code here. Or perhaps Hawkeye doesn't really know about the true intention of the flowers and he's just trying to spread a message surreptitiously. Man, I think this speaks a fair bit to the relationship they have, that Mustang can kind of tell something's not quite right, but, not apocalyptically wrong just yet. So back in the north, the Elric brothers, Winry, Kimberly, and his men are now attempting to hunt down Scar. So at this point, I think Kimberly is somewhat certain but not entirely sure that Dr. Marco and Scar are sort of hanging out around each other. I mean, either way, these two birds are going to get killed with one stone, but it would be nice for Kimberly if they do happen to be together. The situation is still tense, because although the Elric brothers are giving somewhat free rein to hunt down Scar, Kimberly does have two of his loyalists keeping a close-ish eye on them. So naturally, the Elric brothers have devised a cunning plan that consists of running into this old abandoned building and trying to lose him. It seems to have worked, since these guys don't seem smart enough to recognize the signs of a hasty transmutation. I mean, it seems to me that this is probably a temporary solution, considering that they're all searching around the same general area. And labyrinthine though it is, they're both searching for the same target. So, it's kind of a mixed blessing, but Mei Chang is no longer interested in Edward. She's more interested in Alphonse now. And in a weird bit of miscommunication here, it seems like the interest is mutual, at least in Mei Chang's mind. Man, she really has the wrong idea here. She thinks the brothers are just sort of feuding. I'd imagine this is a rather unsettling, turn of events here, watching Winry emerge from Alphonse's armor. Alphonse finally touches off on the most prescient bit of information. He doesn't have to explain himself to anyone. Yeah, I guess it's understandable that Dr. Marco would have to explain things a bit. Because since he last encountered the Elric brothers, he fell off the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. Now this is interesting too, considering that we don't really see anything of Yoki in Brotherhood up until right now, I guess. We're sort of recounting what was one of the first chapters in the manga as a bit of a flashback. I do find it interesting that Yoki is editorializing that, the citizens of the town he was the de facto governor of loved him. I mean, we know that's not true, especially considering the little silent film reel playing for us. I do think that this was a nice way of presenting things. Because, it's sort of like... It tells of a flashback, but in like a really nice novel way. And I do think it also sort of displays like this trickster element to Ed that I don't think we really saw to the same degree later on. Because, the big thing he did was he transmuted, I think, like a bunch of mud into gold ingots. And then after he bribed Yoki with that gold, he just transmuted it right back. Because, as it turns out, actually transmuting things into gold is highly illegal. Who would have guessed, right? I'm pretty sure it's like, in terms of illegality, second only to human transmutation in terms of things you really shouldn't be doing. I do like that no matter what happens here, Yoki still protests his utter innocence and that he was set up by the wicked Elric brothers. I mean, to a degree, I do feel a little sorry for him. I mean, in a sense, he's sort of turned over a bit of a new leaf. He's not exactly doing good things, but he's working for people that are at least opposing the greater evil here. So it unfortunately seems as though Yoki had the misfortune of robbing the Armstrong mansion. And, it really does seem like all of them have the same prodigious strength that the Major does. You know, he's definitely not a good person, and he's sort of fixated on revenge. I don't know, like, I feel like I can cut him a little bit of slack, because, you know, he does seem to have suffered inordinately for what he's done. But at the same time, he's really not a good dude in the first place. So things are getting interesting. Major Miles is breaking off with a small contingent of troops to try and settle things a little bit faster, but, you know, understandably, Kimberly doesn't fully trust him. As well, he shouldn't. So, unfortunately, two of Kimberly's goons have found Scar first. And they seem reasonably confident, which seems a bit odd to me considering Scar's killed state alchemists before. But, you know, it swiftly becomes clear that these guys are far from ordinary. In fact, they appear to be homunculi, but rather high-class homunculi in the sense that they retain their human appearance most of the time and maintain their intelligence. You know, when we saw what happened to poor Nina Tucker, it was very clear that she neither retained her appearance nor her intelligence. And that was probably the result of insufficiently intricate alchemy. So it's interesting in that the linchpin of this whole thing seems to be Scar's brother's notes. So unfortunately, that means they need Scar since he's the only one who can decipher it. But I find it interesting that the Ishvalans who had been exterminated are ultimately kind of the key players in this in a weird sort of way. So naturally, the Elric brothers and Winry, they're none too happy about having to get involved with Scar. Ed is more openly disdainful, like, you know, what do we need him for? But Winry seems to be holding on to a quiet fury, as if she's resolved to do something which is in all likelihood not good. So unfortunately for Scar, it seems that these two homunculi are, they're a pretty decent match for him, in that they're both reasonably powerful and coordinated. Unfortunately, the Elric brothers have decided to intercede on Scar's behalf. Rather unfortunate for Kimberly's goons that they hadn't ascertained the Elric brothers' true motives. I like how they're playing stupid here, like, oh dear, two monsters. We need to beat them up. Plausible deniability, I guess. You know, can Kimberly really get justifiably mad at them if they beat up his goons, if they claim not to know they are his goons? So it seems like the cold weather automail is beneficial in that it's so lightweight that Ed is much more maneuverable. But I feel like there's going to be a downside here, and we just haven't seen it yet. I mean, he definitely hasn't tried transmuting it or anything. Oh dear. Ed's playing a dangerous game here by freezing that one Chimera to Alphonse. I mean, I guess it takes him out of the fight for the time being, but it also hampers Alphonse. And I feel like that's not necessarily a good approach here. You know, it seems like these two goons are not exactly intellectual powerhouses. You know, if you transform back to prove your identity, then you're that much easier to knock out. Man, the Elric brothers really weren't playing around at all. So I feel like Scar and the Elric brothers haven't quite realized that they're working towards the same ends. I mean, obviously they do have reasonable things to argue and fight about. But for the time being, you know, they're working together. I feel like fighting is counterproductive. Of course, it'll probably take calmer heads to prevail in this situation. Although, now that I think about it, Ed's probably so eager to fight because Scar can't destroy his automail anymore. You know, it's not like he needs to destroy the automail to win. You know, speaking of calmer heads prevailing, I feel like Winry's interference is just that. Oh dear. Alright, so it seems like Winry's not going to initiate violence because Major Miles is more than willing to do it instead. So it seems like, against all odds, Winry is the calmest head here in that she seems to be intent on talking and only talking. Presumably to get some kind of closure here. You know, Scar had mentioned it before about how there's a cycle of violence where each act of violence is another link in the chain. And I guess Scar is reasonable enough to say that, you know, no explanation he can offer wouldn't sound like an excuse. And there's nothing he can do to rectify the issue. That is true, and that he is cognizant of that, I think, is indicative of someone reasonably intelligent. You know, it would just take, I guess, a counterpart with enough grace to sort of let bygones be bygones, no matter how terrible they might be. Now, back in Briggs, unfortunately, it seems as though Buccaneer and his group have exceeded the 24-hour time limit, and thus they've been sealed inside the tunnel and consigned to death. Or so we would be led to believe. You know, they were expected. There were people waiting for them, and they opened up the hatch. So once again, they seem to have used a bit of a loophole to get around things. General Armstrong herself gave the guy on watch duty a broken watch, so, 24 hours has not elapsed, therefore they won't be sealed in. Once again, she's stern and exacting in her orders, but she holds honor even above that. When 24 hours passes, seal them in, but also, here's a watch that will not allow 24 hours to pass. I think that's the last little bit that really seals it for me in terms of making Armstrong my favorite character. She denies showing any mercy whatsoever while still sort of smiling to herself. It's like a little tiny bit of tenderness, but it's still just enough. So unfortunately, it seems like Central Command is nosing in about General Raven and his untimely demise. And they seem to have arrived in force. So if this were anyone else, I'd say it's not good, but I feel like Armstrong would have no compunctions about killing all of them and being done with it. Alright, so the plot's thickening. It seems like Scar has taken a hostage of his own. And I think it's safe to assume this was probably a ruse on the part of the Elric brothers, but nonetheless it wrongfoots Kimberly nicely. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.